welcome back to the Love Well podcast. It is good to have you with me here this week. We are live on Facebook and YouTube and all that good stuff. And Twitter, we're live there as well. And so if you're listening to this on the audio podcast, just know that if you follow me on some of the social medias, you can also catch this live. If you want the video version of this, it will be archived at youtube.com/Daniel Rose. And so you can always head over there and catch the video archives. You can follow me on Twitter at Daniel M. Rose. That's the easiest way to kind of keep up with me on the socials, and also to be notified when I go live with podcast recording. It's kind of been a fun thing to record the podcast live and publish it via the social medias that way. It's been a good discipline for me, and I don't know, it seems like it's been helpful for folks. This is our Sunday on a Tuesday. Trying to get back in the rhythm of doing it on Mondays, but with Labor Day and everything yesterday, Monday just didn't happen. So here we are on Tuesday morning, recording this thing, and we are into part 3 of our 7-part series on Jesus's I am statements from the Gospel of John. This is where Jesus takes some time to basically, through these 7 statements, declare who he is. He makes his identity known to the people and to the world. And so this is a really good snapshot of trying to understand how Jesus understood himself. So that's why we're taking the time to walk through these things. If you want to be a part of the real life conversation, you can do so by joining us at a missional community. We gather in Fowlerville, we gather in Ypsilanti, and we're working on developing some other places as well. But we'll wait on that for a minute. But you can get all those details at acts13.net/events. So I hope that you will check that out, because it's just a great way to start the week with missional community. We gather. Pre-COVID, we would do dinner together and hang out and laugh and tell stories, and then we would spend a little bit of time in the scriptures and share communion together. Right now, though, we are kind of doing things a little bit differently. We're gathering outside and social distant, physically distancing, all that good stuff. And we've kind of put dinner and communion on the shelf for a minute until our leadership feels, though, that it's safe to resume doing those things. But until now, but right now you guys can come hang out. We get around, we talk about the scriptures together in community, and then we spend some time praying for one another and kind of hearing what's going on in each other's lives. So it's a great way to start your week, Sunday nights. And you can find out all that information right here, missional community details, acts13.net/events. And as always, you can subscribe to the podcast real easy at danielmrose.com. You just jump in there and drop your email address, subscribe. New episodes get dropped right into your inbox. If I write something, that also gets dropped in your inbox. And it's been a minute since I've written, for the website, but primarily because this experience here of recording and doing some Facebook Live, Twitter Live, YouTube Live kind of stuff has just been, it's been really good. And, I think I think have gotten a little bit more traction. So we're gonna kind of keep rolling and trying different things, and the writing will probably come back at some point because I love it, and I guess I do it for me more than anyone else. But yeah, so I think those are kind of the announcements. I think it's kind of the info you need, or that I want to pass on to you that I think you need. And so let's jump in, shall we? Today we are in John chapter 10, verses 7 through 10. And it goes like this. It says, "Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Now, our next few conversations, we are going to find this "I have come they might have life and have it to the full" thing come back in a number of different ways. I think for me, one of the things that I'm realizing is this second half of verse 10, "I have come they might have life and might have it to the full," has been shaping my understanding of what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to be a Christian, more than most of the verses and passages in Scripture, because this little verse, this little half a verse, really goes to this kind of question of what does it look like for human beings to flourish? And I think in God's world, this is what he wants. He wants his image bearers to have a life of flourishing, that he wants our lives to be full. He's not a cosmic killjoy, right? I mean, I think this is the way a lot of folks think about God, that he's just out there to shut things down. It's a list of do's and don'ts, and whatever you do, don't do this, don't do that. Man, that is not it. This is not what God is about. God is about us having life and life to the full. And God is about his creation flourishing. See, we are image bearers. We bear his image. When you interact with your neighbor, when you interact with that person down the street, you are interacting with an image bearer. I mean, C.S. Lewis says things like, the most holy thing that we interact with outside of the Eucharist, outside of communion, is our neighbor. And I think that's really true. I think it's really a really helpful way of understanding the people around us, even more so helping us to understand who we are, because we are image bearers, and God's desire for us is to flourish. He wants us to have life and have it to the full. And we get this picture here that Jesus lays out for us in John 10, 7 through 10, where he says, "I am the gate. I am the gate." Now remember, this "I am" statement goes all the way back to Moses hanging out and talking with God before he went to go lead the people of Israel out of bondage, out of slavery, and into freedom. And he wanted to know God's name, and God said, "Well, my name is I am that I am." And this little phrase "I am" became a special way of talking about God. It is his name. And so for Jesus to take the "I am" part, he is revealing to the world and that he self-understands, that he understands himself as the divine, as God. And so, we have to understand what a big deal these I am statements are. And so you can go back, if you go back to part 1, you get a little more full conversation about the centrality and the importance of the I am statements. But here in John 10, we have this really intriguing statement by Jesus where he says, I am the gate. And that's a weird thing for someone to say that they are, right? So what does he mean here? What is going on with the I am the gate thing? Well, first of all, we have to understand this in its broader context. So we're going to go back here and we're going to do some very high level seminary kind of teaching here. All right. It took 4 years of seminary classes to understand this. You ready? Hold on to your seats. This is big. John chapter 9 comes before John chapter 10. Yep. I know. It's a shocker. John 9 informs John 10. You see, our chapter breaks, these big numbers and little numbers for chapters and verses, and even more so, are the headings that our Bibles drop in. They're not very helpful because they break up the flow of the story, and they oftentimes create in our minds unnatural breaks that really aren't intended to be there. John 9 and John 10, they flow together. They are one whole. And so for us to understand what is going on here in John 10, 7 through 10, we have to understand what happened in John chapter 9 first, right? And we even have to understand briefly, we got to take a quick look at what happens here in John chapter 1, 1 through 6, because it gives us a little bit of insight into what's going on into John 10, 7 through 10. So let's set a little background, right? John chapter 9, what happens? Well, it opens up with Jesus and the boys, walking. Now, it says the disciples, and so it probably also included the women who followed along after Jesus. So it was Jesus and the fellas and the ladies. They're walking, and they see a man blind from birth. And the disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, this is a really common way of understanding the world at this time. The thought was that physical illness displayed spiritual realities. So if you were blind, if you had cancer, if you were, if there's something going on problematically with you physically, it was due to sin. And in this case, this man was born blind. He came out of the womb blind. He'd never known a day with sight. So the disciples wanted to know who sinned, whose responsibility was this? Is the sin, is the sin on the dude, or is the sin on the parents? And Jesus says, "Hey, neither this man nor his parents. That wasn't the issue. It happened so the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." We hit on light of the world already earlier, right? So, so we have this situation here. And so what does Jesus do? Well, he spits and does some really gross stuff and heals the man. And he says, hey, go be washed. And the guy comes home seeing. And there's a lot of confusion. And so the Pharisees bring in this man. Now, the Pharisees were basically the evangelicals, right? I mean, these were the people that cared deeply about the Bible. They cared deeply about living holy lives, of being good, moral, God-fearing people. We give the Pharisees a bad rap, but for those of us who, go to church on the regular, for those of us that read our Bibles and pray and do that kind of thing, we probably would have been aligned with the Pharisees back in the first century. So we got to be careful about just dogging out the Pharisees all the time. But just like us, they tend to major on the minors, and they tend to get a lot of stuff really wrong. And that's what happens when you seek to be the people that are in control of religious life and religious freedom and religious identity, right? You get a lot of things wrong because what happens is you begin to filter it through your likes and your dislikes, and you begin to miss out on the grace and the mercy that we see ultimately in Christ. Now, the Pharisees were doing the best they could, but they were still missing the trajectory that gets laid out, right? That gets laid out in the Old Testament. When we read through it carefully, we begin to see a trajectory of grace begin to come out very clearly, even in the Old Testament, that oftentimes gets this bad rap as being, stories of an angry God. And, if we read it closely, that's not really the picture that we get. So the Pharisees bring him in, and they don't like what he has to say. And so they bring in his parents. And his parents, it says, they ask the question, is this your son? Is this the one you say was born blind, in verse 19? How is it that now he can see? Verse 20, we know he is our son, the parents answered, and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, he is of age, ask him. You see, the religious leaders of the time had, according to John, decided already that if you were following Jesus as the Messiah, they would remove you from the synagogue. Now, we don't see tons of evidence of this historically, right? So a lot of the commentators think that this was kind of put in. John's commentary here may have been put in, to kind of show that what was happening in his time, near the end of the first century, had roots all the way back into Jesus's life. Right? And this was a common way of writing history and doing things in the first century. Remember that history written in the first century is different than the kind of history that gets written today. So there's this mix here, and John is also writing a gospel. He's not writing pure, unadulterated history. And so, so there's this problem here. And so they bring in the guy, and they say, tell the truth, give glory to God, tell the truth. And Jesus, and the guy replied, he is the one that healed me. The Pharisee said, we know he's a sinner. We know that Jesus is a sinner. Think about this, right? Why is he a sinner? He is a sinner because Jesus has said, I am. Jesus has said, I am the light of the world. Jesus has made clear that he is God. So they kick the guy out. They kick him out of the synagogue. They say, hey, you're out. You're not a part of this community anymore. And they kick him out of his community of faith. Jesus hears about this, and he goes and he finds him. I love this picture of Jesus' compassion, right? This is Jesus living out the man who goes to find his one lost sheep or his lost coin. This is Jesus really living out the parables that we see him teach in Luke chapter 15. And he asks the guy, he says, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man asked. Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. Then the man said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what? Are we blind too? Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. So Jesus here is pushing against a lot of the standard way that the religious folks of the time thought, taught, and led, and engaged with their community. And so now Jesus goes into this whole thing about sheep and pens and all kinds of other stuff, right? And in verse 6, after he's laid out this little statement here in verses 1 through 5 that I'm not going to read, he says, Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Now, figure of speech here is different than the word for parable. And some of the scholars that I was reading on this, they say this is important. This is an important distinction, and I think they're right. Jesus here is using an illustration. He's not telling a parable, and so a parable. When we read through parables, we are oftentimes looking for parallels, one-to-one kind of identification of, what does this character represent, and that kind of thing. And we also begin looking for kind of a center moral statement within the story, kind of the main point that the story is making. But here in John chapter 10, Jesus is giving an illustration. That's what figure of speech is. He's just using this idea of sheep, gates, pens, all this kind of stuff as illustrations of what he's trying to explain to these guys. We do this all the time. I mean, whether you're sitting in a classroom, in college, or our high school teachers, or even our elementary school teachers, pastors, anyone who is teaching almost always uses some form of illustrations, right? Some sort of metaphor that, you take from, culture, you take from the physical world, whatever it might be. You say, see, it's kind of like this, and you try to make these connections. Well, in the first century, where Jesus was teaching, there were shepherds all over the place. These were just guys that were very much present in their world. So this is not some, unique kind of thing. And so Jesus probably, as he's talking to them, looked around and saw some shepherds and their sheep and was like, hey, this situation is like a shepherd and their sheep in their pen. Now, some things to understand here as we get into 7 through 10 more specifically. A pen was used oftentimes in the summer months by these shepherds. They would take, they'd take the sheep out, they'd take their flocks out, and they didn't want to have to come all the way back into town, drive them back into town just to go back out to the pasture. So what they would do is they would take some rocks and build, just tall enough walls, and then put some like thorns along the top of the wall to, kind of keep the sheep in and keep some of the predators out. And then they would become the door for the wall by laying down in the entryway. Right? So this is kind of what would happen. Now, you have Jesus here in 7 through 10. He says, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. Now, it's interesting here. He doesn't say he's the gatekeeper. He says he's the gate. And he is making a distinction between gate and gatekeeper. You see, the Pharisees were functioning as gatekeepers. They were determining who got to go in and who got to stay in. That is the function of the gatekeeper. Who decides who goes in? Jesus is saying, no, I am the gate. And by me, the sheep go in and they go out. It's a both and. They come in for protection. They go out for pasture. It is this flow of in and out. It is this picture of grace. You see that the gate is the passageway by which the sheep enter into protection, and it is the passageway by which the sheep go out into pasture. So this is Jesus just talking about this, this idea of, I have come that they might have life and might have them to the full. This is what we need, isn't it? Don't we need protection and pasture? Don't we need the security, the safety, knowing that there is a shepherd that cares, knowing that someone is watching out for us? And at the same time, knowing that, having that security, we are freed to go to pasture. We are freed to go out and thrive and live. If the sheep are just kept in the pen, eventually they will run out of food. Eventually they will starve and they will die if they are never let out of the pen. And this is what is happening with the gatekeepers. This is what is happening with the religious elite of Jesus's day. They're basically keeping the sheep in the pen, and they're not allowing them to go out to pasture. They're so afraid of what would happen out in the pasture that they say, no. You got to stay right here. You got to stay where we can watch you, where we can guard you, where we can protect you. Don't go out there. Do not go out there. If you try to go out there, then you're not one of us. Right? This is what's going on here. And he says, all who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. You see, the thieves and robbers here probably are the religious leaders. They may also be pointing to a number of the false messiahs that were floating around at this time, people who were pointing to themselves. There's a chance, here in verse 10, where it talks about, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, that John here is again kind of doing some reading back and looking back to the consequences of the false messiahs, because in AD 70 you have the sacking of Jerusalem and the fall of the temple and the fall of the city, and it's just a bad time. What did you experience? You experienced stealing, killing, and destroying. The other thing here, though, I think this points to is that when we try to use our own foolish strategies, the way this comes to fruition is through pain, heartache, violence, and destruction. When we seek to be the gatekeepers, when we seek to use our own foolish strategies, we move away from the life to the full, the flourishing human life that Jesus talks about. And we experience only pain and death. What was the shepherd willing to do here? The shepherd, Jesus, being the gate, being willing to lay down in the door and become the gate, to become the passageway, to say, through me you are saved. And this through me that you are saved is into the pen and out of the pen, from protection to pasture, flourishing life. He's willing to lay down his life for them. You see, Jesus here, this contrast that he has set up, it's so relevant for us today, isn't it? I mean, so many of my colleagues, so many people who would kind of be the Pharisees of today, we're just like the Pharisees of old. We're looking to maintain power and control over the lives of people. We want them to do things the way we want them to do them. We've created our own foolish strategies, and we have moved away from the strategies of grace. We have moved away from the Jesus way. We have become gatekeepers in so many ways. And we are no longer following the one who was the gate. And so I think maybe what we all need to ask ourselves is, in what ways are we using foolish strategies of the world that have the appearance of wisdom, right? It has the appearance of wisdom to grab hold of power, to grab hold of of might and strength to try to dominate those who are different from us. Yeah, that has the appearance of wisdom in the world. And for a period of time, sometimes those who go that route look like they're winning. Sometimes it looks that way. And so we get sucked in and we think, well, if it works for them, I guess it'll work for me. And I guess that's the way of the world. We need to go that route. No, because eventually Jesus says, all that will bring you is heartache and pain, stealing, killing, and destruction. That's what it will bring you. When you follow the foolish strategies of the world, that is what you will end up getting. But when we stop seeking to be gatekeepers, when we stop seeking to follow the ways of the gatekeepers, and we start looking towards the gate, right? What do we discover? We discover life, and life to the full. Because we discover protection in the pen and pasture, which is this picture of joy and blessing and life to the full. But we know on the one hand that we have the protection, right? And on the other hand, we have the pasture. We have life to the full. There's freedom. There's freedom. So when Jesus says, I am the gate, whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and they will go out and find pasture. Friends, we can rest in the knowledge that we are cared for, that we are deeply loved by the one who's willing to be the gate. And as a result of that, we get to go out, and we can go out into the pasture, and we can live life to the full. We can live a life that flourishes and however God has made us. And that is living the salvation life. That is what it looks like in the day-to-day to be saved. It is to live life free in the pasture, knowing that freedom is rooted in the security of the protection of the one who is the gate. Guys, thanks for being with me this week. And I don't know, I hope this was helpful to you. I would encourage you to really think through, are you living a life of flourishing? Are you living life to the full? Because I think that's what Jesus wants us to live. I think he wants us to be a people whose lives flourish. And so if this was helpful, share it. Share it with your friends. I would encourage you, wherever you subscribe to the podcast, please rate it. Please comment. It helps other people find it. And if you want to continue the conversation with me, hit me up on Twitter at Daniel M. Rose. Or even better yet, you can hit me up on Telegram. And Telegram is a fantastic messaging service that a number of my friends and I are using. And it's really, really great. You can hit me up there, t.me/Daniel M. Rose. So let's connect, and also make sure that you subscribe to Love Well at danielemrose.com. The easiest way to have whatever I create, whether that's publishing audio or writing, gets dropped right into your inbox. So thanks for being with me this week. And until next time, love well, my friends.